Morning in Seattle was cloaked in a thick veil of mist, with fine drizzle falling from a sky blanketed by cold, heavy clouds. The hum of traffic echoed from the streets below, blending with the rustle of wind brushing through soaked trees. Amid the damp chill and the city's indifferent rush, Lena Morgan stood still before the towering glass headquarters of Hartwell Investments, where the man who held her future was waiting. Her fingers clutched a crumpled envelope. Inside was the foreclosure notice for the old house she had lived in with her grandfather for over a decade. It wasn't just a shelter. It was the last remnant of her world after the tragic accident that had taken her parents. She was only 13 then. Her grandfather had been the only one to take her in, the only family she had left. Everything began unraveling 3 weeks ago when Lena discovered the house had been mortgaged by her late father years ago, before the crash. No one in the family had known. And now Hartwell Investments had assumed the debt. The paperwork was ironclad. There was no loophole. Lena worked as a freelance illustrator, barely getting by on inconsistent income. By day, she worked from a corner cafe, sketching on her tablet. By night, she returned home to care for her aging grandfather, whose memory slipped further with each passing week. Every drawing, every line was a small attempt to hold on to something that still felt like peace. But now, even that was slipping away. She had tried pleading, letters, calls, even begging. All were ignored. Except for one thing, a meeting, offered and confirmed with Julian Hart. Lena took a deep breath, adjusted her rain-drenched coat, tied back her damp hair, and stepped inside. The glass doors closed behind her. That night, Lena sat alone on the wooden chair by the window of her small apartment. The rain still fell steadily outside, trailing down the glass like tears no one bothered to wipe away. On the table lay the contract Julian Hart had given her, printed on thick white paper, as cold and emotionless as his voice had been that morning. She had read it 3 times. Every line was clear, clinical. 1 year of legal marriage kept private with no obligations afterward. In return, she would receive financial support and lifetime medical care for her grandfather. Not a single mention of affection. No room for dreams. Lena asked herself, what am I doing? Am I selling myself? But then her gaze drifted toward the bedroom where her grandfather slept beneath a soft amber lamp, his breathing shallow but peaceful. He was all she had left. There was no one else. No family. No lifeline. No time. Her hands trembled as she reached for the pen. Her heart ached as if something sacred was being surrendered. But she knew this wasn't defeat. It was the only choice she had left, to protect the one thing that still mattered. 3 days after signing the marriage contract, Lena stood before the black iron gates of the Hart estate. The mansion sat atop a quiet hill in northern Seattle, surrounded by neatly trimmed hedges and a stone path winding inward. Everything about the place screamed perfection, but the kind that sent a chill down your spine. She had never seen a house so large. No birdsong, no signs of life, just symmetrical lawns and an unsettling silence that clung to the air. The front door clicked open. An older woman in a black uniform stepped out, her silver hair tightly pinned back, her eyes polite but distant. "Welcome, Ms. Morgan," she said, or rather, Mrs. Hart. Lena gave a slight nod, forcing a faint smile. The housekeeper, Mrs. Lang, led her through a marble-floored foyer with towering ceilings and abstract art hanging in perfect order along the walls. Inside was a different world, sterile, vast, and utterly silent. Her room was a suite larger than the home she once shared with her grandfather, a walk-in closet filled with new clothes, a slate-tiled bathroom, and windows overlooking a glassy lake. But Lena brought only her worn canvas bag, a few clothes, and her sketchbook. That first night, she couldn't sleep. Silence wrapped around the mansion like a heavy blanket, making every small sound echo with eerie intensity. Just before midnight, the faint sound of piano drifted down the hallway. Gentle, live, Not a recording, but someone playing. Lena stepped out of bed, her bare feet touching the cold stone floor, drawn forward as if the melody pulled her by an invisible thread. The sound of the piano guided Lena to the far end of the second-floor hallway. Each step echoed softly, the melody weaving through the silence like a whispered sorrow. In front of her stood a dark wooden door, the only one Julian had strictly told her never to open. But the music was too gentle, too real. Her heart couldn't walk away. Lena pressed her ear to the door. A child's voice whispered from inside, "One more song, Aunt May." Then came an older woman's calm reply, "Just one, Ivy, then it's bedtime." Lena froze. Ivy, the name struck her like a sudden gust of wind. She stepped back, startled, and accidentally bumped into a small console table. A porcelain vase toppled and shattered on the floor. The music stopped. The door swung open. An elderly woman with kind eyes and silver hair peered before her. "Who are you?" Lena steadied her voice. "I'm Julian's wife." A little girl, no older than 5, peeked out from behind the woman's skirt. Big, curious eyes, soft brown curls. But what stole Lena's breath was the icy blue stare, identical to Julian's. "Are you my dad's new wife?" the girl asked. Lena knelt down and smiled gently. "Your name's Ivy, isn't it?" The girl nodded. "Do you like marshmallows?" Ivy grinned. "A lot." Lena laughed, her first real laugh since entering the mansion. But then, at the end of the hall, a shadow appeared. Julian. His eyes flared, cold and sharp. "You weren't supposed to be in there," he said, voice low and restrained. Julian led Lena to the library after the incident. He stood before the tall window, back turned, hands tucked into his pockets. Lena entered slowly, her heart heavy with guilt and a lingering curiosity she couldn't shake. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop," she said softly. "I was just drawn by the music." Julian didn't turn around. Ivy wasn't part of the contract. Lena clenched her fists. "I didn't know you had a child." A long silence. At last Julian spoke, voice low and rough. "My wife, Isabel, died in a car accident 3 years ago. That night she called me. I chose work. She drove off, angry, and never came back." He paused, shoulders stiff. "I hid Ivy from the press, from shareholders. They didn't need to know she existed." Lena stepped closer, her voice a whisper. "But Ivy needs to know you exist, not just as a shadow in her own home." Julian turned. In his ice-blue eyes now rested exhaustion and something fractured beneath the surface. He was no longer the cold CEO or the man behind the contract, but a father drowning in guilt. "I can't lose anyone else," he murmured. "But you can't keep Ivy in a glass cage forever," Lena said gently. "She deserves the world, and so do you." Julian didn't respond, but his eyes had changed. In the weeks that followed, no one said anything directly, but everything began to shift. Lena walked Ivy through the garden, read fairy tales at bedtime, and occasionally shared quiet breakfasts with Julian. The silence was still there, but it was no longer cold. Sometimes, Lena caught him looking at her, not with suspicion, but with something softer, something real, and she realized her heart was beginning to change. Change didn't arrive in grand declarations of love, but in quiet gestures, unspoken yet unmistakable. One afternoon, as Lena poured hot water for tea, her hand slipped and a drop scalded her wrist. She let out a soft gasp. Julian, just entering the kitchen, rushed over immediately. He didn't ask questions. He gently pulled her hand under cold water, then opened a drawer and retrieved a gauze wrap. His movements were precise and strangely tender, as if even the smallest touch might hurt her more. "Don't try to do everything yourself when you're not feeling well," he murmured, his voice low and sincere. For the first time, Lena didn't feel the space between them. When Lena caught a cold during a rainy spell, she curled up beneath the blanket, her head throbbing. When she woke, a tray of warm porridge sat beside her bed, along with medicine and a damp towel. Julian was seated by the window, reading a report, but his eyes lifted the moment she stirred. "You should eat something," he said gently, his voice soft, almost shy. But what moved Lena the most were the days he quietly accompanied her to the nursing home to visit her grandfather. Julian rarely spoke, just carried her bag, held the door, or sat silently beside her, listening to old stories as if they mattered. There were no roses, no poetic words, just presence, steady and real. Lena realized that love didn't always need to be spoken. Sometimes it only needed to be felt. And she felt it, deeply. In every gesture, every glance, Julian was slowly learning how to love. That afternoon, Lena was reading to Ivy in the living room when the front doors swung open. A tall woman, her silver hair swept up in a commanding twist, entered with the sharp echo of heels against the stone floor. Lena rose quickly. Ivy clung to her, instinctively seeking safety. "And who might you be?" the woman asked, her voice as sharp as glass. "I'm Julian's wife," Lena replied, trying to stay calm. The woman scoffed. "Wife? Darling, I'm Estelle Whitmore, Isabel's mother, Julian's real wife. You're a cheap joke." Lena stepped back slightly. Estelle advanced, her gaze cold and scornful. "I know your kind. Orphaned, broke, clinging to a wealthy man for a way out." Then, without warning, she raised her hand and slapped Lena hard across the face. Ivy screamed. Lena touched her cheek, eyes welling, not from pain but humiliation. "Get out of this house," Estelle snapped. "You don't belong here. Don't think that flimsy little contract makes you anything more than a gold digger." Lena turned. Ivy grabbed her hand, eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Are you really leaving?" Lena knelt, brushing Ivy's curls from her face. "I don't want to, sweetheart, but sometimes, even when grown-ups love a place with all their heart, they still have to walk away." She walked out of the mansion in silence, her heart splintering with each step. Not because of the insults, but because, for the first time, she realized she had fallen in love with this place, with that little girl, and with the man who had once given her nothing but a cold contract, but had warmed her heart, little by little. 2 days after leaving the mansion, Lena still hadn't found peace. In the tiny apartment she'd rented, she sat by the window, unable to draw a single steady line. Her heart felt tangled, not from humiliation, but from the ache Ivy left behind, from the memory of Julian's eyes. How vividly they stayed with her. A knock broke the silence. She opened the door. Julian stood there, his eyes sunken from sleeplessness, hair disheveled, the usual sharpness gone. "Can I come in?" he asked softly. She stepped back silently, letting him in. Julian didn't look away from her. "I know what happened. Isabel's mother. She had no right to hurt you, and I was wrong for not protecting you." Lena lowered her gaze. "She only said what everyone thinks, right? I have nothing. I'm just an orphan clinging to a contract to survive." "No," Julian said immediately, his voice unsteady. "You're the only one who stepped into that house asking for nothing and gave more than anyone ever has." She looked at him, for the first time without fear. Just exhaustion. Just honesty. "I was wrong," he said again. "I was afraid of opening up, afraid of feeling. But you showed me needing someone isn't weakness. It's grace." And he reached out. "Come home." Lena hesitated. "This isn't simple, Julian." "I know," he said. "But if you stay here, my heart won't rest another second." And so she returned with him. That evening, soft rain fell. Julian led her to the greenhouse behind the estate. Raindrops streamed down the glass, lights casting their soft glow onto their faces. He held her hand firmly like never before. No contract, no conditions, no timelines, just you, me, and Ivy. Then He knelt, hands trembling, as he opened a black velvet box. "Lena Morgan, will you marry me?" She wept, laughing through her tears. "You once said you didn't believe in love." Julian met her eyes. "I don't, but I believe in you." The wedding took place on a quiet autumn afternoon in the small garden behind the mansion, where Julian had once proposed without conditions. No media, no grand affair. Just close friends, simple flowers, soft piano music, and Ivy in a white dress, beaming as the flower girl. Lena wore a soft silk gown, her hand in Julian's, as they walked between rows of rustic wooden chairs. Their eyes met without hesitation, as if this had always been where they belonged. Lena's grandfather, now fully recovered, sat in the front row. His eyes misted over as he watched his granddaughter smile, a peaceful smile he thought he might never see again. After the ceremony, Julian leaned down and took his hand. "I'd love for you to come live with us," Julian said. "Ivy would be happier, and so would Lena." The old man squeezed his hand, his gaze soft. "Thank you, son, for giving her a real home." In the mornings that followed, the house was no longer a place of silence. It echoed with laughter, tiny footsteps, and soft melodies from the piano in Ivy's room, a room Lena now entered freely, no longer forbidden. Winter had passed, and the hilltop mansion welcomed the first light of spring. The air grew softer, the trees began to bud, and birdsong filled the mornings with gentle light. Their little family moved in a rhythm of peace that each of them had once longed for. Ivy dashed through the garden, her laughter floating on the breeze. Lena's grandfather sat on the porch with a book, lifting his eyes now and then to smile at his great-granddaughter's joy. Lena, painted in the sun, while Julian, still quiet and watchful, stood at the window, taking it all in with a gaze full of calm affection. One early spring morning, Lena approached him with 2 cups of hot cocoa. He smiled, but the sparkle in her eyes told him something had shifted. She placed his hand on her belly and whispered, "There's a new heartbeat, ours." Julian stood still, then pulled her into his arms. Words failed him. When Ivy heard the news, she squealed with joy. "I'm going to be a big sister. I'll teach the baby stories and share all my marshmallows." Laughter burst through the sunlit kitchen, and in that moment, Lena knew she was no longer a woman simply surviving. She was a wife, a mother, the heart of a family she never thought she'd have. On a sun-drenched summer morning, Julian stood beneath the old maple tree in the backyard garden. A gentle breeze carried the scent of lavender and birdsong. In his hands was a faded piece of paper, the cold marriage contract where everything had once begun. He didn't burn it. Instead, he tore it slowly, piece by piece, letting the wind carry the fragments away. The conditions, the limits, the fear, gone, as if they'd never existed. Lena approached, her hand still streaked with paint from drawing with Ivy. She didn't ask anything, just looked at him with quiet warmth. Julian smiled as the shredded paper danced behind him like tiny butterflies. "No, I'm leaving behind what no longer matters to begin the rest of my life with you." A month later, beneath a soft evening sky, the cries of a newborn baby girl echoed through the room. Lena beamed with joy as Julian placed their tiny daughter in her arms. "Ivy has a little sister now," he whispered. Ivy rushed in, eyes glowing. "Her name will be Aria. I'll teach her to sing, and no one will ever mess with her." Lena rested her head on Julian's shoulder, wrapping her arms around both children. A family. No more conditions. No more fear. Only love and peace.